had seen enough war to last 3 lifetimes. The plasma burns across his left shoulder told stories he preferred not to remember, and the cybernetic implant replacing his right eye clicked softly whenever he focused on distant objects. Retirement on Earth's colony world of Haven 7 was supposed to be peaceful, quiet farming, maybe some fishing in the crystal-clear lakes that dotted the planet's surface. That peace shattered when the delegation arrived. The massive black ships descended from the sky like mechanical thunderclouds, their surfaces rippling with energy fields that made the air itself taste metallic. Watched from his porch as the lead vessel settled into the valley below his modest farmhouse. He'd fought for 12 years during the Outer Rim conflicts, and seeing their ships again made his trigger finger itch for a weapon he no longer carried. 3 hours later, a hover transport climbed the winding path to his home. Remained seated in his wooden chair, a cup of synthetic coffee growing cold in his weathered hands. The transport's passengers emerged in a formal procession that seemed almost ceremonial. Emperor himself stepped forward, his towering 7-foot frame wrapped in robes that shifted colors like oil on water. The ruler's 4 eyes studied with an intensity that would have made lesser humans step back. Behind him walked an entourage of advisors and guards, their scaled skin catching the afternoon sunlight. Terran military designation Sergeant Major, retired. His voice carried the peculiar harmonic undertones that made speech sound like multiple people speaking in perfect unison. I have come to fulfill an ancient obligation. Took a slow sip of his coffee and set the cup down with deliberate care. Emperor, can't say I was expecting visitors today, especially not ones who tried to blast me into atoms a few years back. The wars between our peoples have ended. What brings me here today predates those conflicts by many centuries. Gestured to one of his attendants, who approached carrying what looked like a transport cage covered in dark fabric. During the Battle of Station, you saved the life of my nephew, Prince. He was captured during a failed reconnaissance mission. Remembered that day clearly. The young officer had been barely alive when found him in the wreckage of a scout ship. Military protocol demanded he turn the prisoner over to intelligence for interrogation. Instead, had patched up the alien's wounds and arranged for him to be included in a prisoner exchange 2 weeks later. I did what any decent soldier would do, said. Didn't matter what species he was. To you, perhaps. To my people, this act of mercy created a debt of honor that cannot be ignored. Secondary eyes focused on while his primary eyes remained fixed on the horizon. By ancient law, I am bound to offer you a gift of equal value to the life you preserved. The attendant set down the cage and removed the covering. Inside, a creature unlike anything had ever seen pressed against the bars. It resembled a wolf, but its fur held an almost liquid quality, shifting between deep blue and silver depending on how the light struck it. Its eyes were larger than any Earth canines, a brilliant amber that seemed to hold intelligence far beyond animal instinct. This is, announced. She is of a species we collected during our expansion 3 generations ago. Her people were warriors and scholars, much like yours. They are now extinct. Studied the creature more closely. Something in those amber eyes made him uncomfortable. Not fear, but the sense that he was being evaluated by an intelligence that understood more than it let on. Why are you giving her to me? And why do you call it a gift if her people are extinct? His expression shifted in what recognized as the equivalent of disgust. The were problematic. They questioned our authority, rejected our culture, maintained their independence even in captivity. We kept some alive for study, but they served no useful purpose. Most of my advisors recommended termination decades ago. Felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same rage that had driven him through countless battles. You're giving me what amounts to a political prisoner because you consider her people worthless. I am fulfilling an obligation, corrected. What you do with the gift is your choice. Keep her, release her into your wilderness, or dispose of her as you see fit. The debt will be considered paid. The creature had remained silent throughout the exchange, but noticed her ears had perked up when mentioned disposal. Those intelligent eyes fixed on with what looked like hope, though he might have been projecting human emotions onto an alien species. The cage comes with a universal translator, one of his advisors added. She understands our speech, though she rarely chooses to respond. Stood up slowly, his old war wounds making the movement more effort than it should have been. He walked to the cage and knelt down, bringing himself eye level with. Up close, her resemblance to an earth wolf was even more striking, though her proportions were slightly different. Longer limbs, a more pronounced skull, and that strange, color-shifting fur. "What's your real name?" he asked quietly. The creature's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment thought she might actually respond. Instead, she pressed closer to the bars, her nose nearly touching his outstretched hand. His harmonic voice interrupted the moment. "The translator will allow you to understand her if she chooses to speak. Most have remained silent for years. We believe their spirit has been broken." Looked back at the Emperor, his cybernetic eye zooming in to read the micro-expressions that played across the alien's scaled features. Satisfaction, maybe even amusement. Was enjoying this, treating it like he was disposing of unwanted garbage while fulfilling a legal obligation. "I'll take her," said. "Excellent, the debt is satisfied," turned toward his transport. "Do not attempt to return her, human. This transaction is final." Watched the delegation leave, their ships rising into the sky with the same ominous grace they displayed upon arrival. Only when the last vessel disappeared beyond the clouds did he turn his attention back to the cage. Sat perfectly still, those amber eyes tracking his every movement. "Well," said, reaching for the cage's locking mechanism, "let's see what kind of trouble I've got myself into." The lock disengaged with a soft click, and the cage door swung open. Expected the creature to bolt for freedom immediately. Instead, remained motionless, watching him with that unnervingly intelligent gaze. "You're free to go if you want," told her. "There's plenty of wilderness out there, fresh water, probably some native animals you could hunt. I won't try to stop you." For several long seconds, neither of them moved, then took a single step forward, emerging from the cage for the first time in what might have been years. She was larger than had initially thought, roughly the size of a full-grown German shepherd, though her build suggested speed and agility rather than raw strength. She padded across the porch, sniffing at various objects before settling down nearest chair. Not close enough to touch, but clearly choosing to stay rather than flee. "Guess that answers that question," muttered. He settled back into his chair, uncertain how to proceed. The universal translator remained silent, apparently had no intention of speaking, regardless of whether she possessed the ability. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, found himself studying his unexpected guest. The way she held herself suggested military training or at least discipline. Her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, cataloging potential threats and escape routes. She was a soldier, he realized, or had been before becoming a prisoner. "I know what it's like," he said quietly. "Being alone, I mean, losing everyone you served with." His ears twitched, but she gave no other sign of acknowledgement. Stood up and walked toward his front door. "I'm going to make dinner. You can come in if you want or stay out here. Up to you." Inside his modest home, moved through the familiar routine of preparing a simple meal. His refrigeration unit held mostly vegetables grown in his garden and synthetic protein from the colony's processing plant. Not exactly fine dining, but it had sustained him for 3 years of retirement. A soft scratching at the door made him look up from the stove. Sat just outside, visible through the transparent aluminum window. She wasn't begging to be let in, just watching. Opened the door, changed your mind. Padded inside, her movements careful and controlled. She explored the small living space with the same systematic approach she'd used on the porch, investigating each room before returning to the main area. "Not much to look at, I know," said, stirring the vegetables in their cooking pot. "But it's home." For the first time's composure cracked slightly. She sat down heavily, and something in her posture reminded of soldiers he'd known who'd lost everything in the war. The weight of survival, of being the last one standing when everyone else had fallen. Served his dinner and placed a bowl of water on the floor. He'd offer her food later if she seemed interested, but for now he didn't want to push. Trust would have to develop gradually. As he ate, found himself talking, something he rarely did anymore. He told about the colony, about the farming techniques he'd been learning, about the strange local weather patterns that could shift from sunshine to thunderstorms in minutes. Simple, non-threatening conversation that filled the silence without demanding response. When he finished eating, realized had moved closer during his monologue. She now sat within arm's reach, though still maintaining enough distance to flee if necessary. "Tomorrow I need to check the irrigation system in the south field," said, carrying his dishes to the cleaning unit. You're welcome to come along if you want, or explore on your own. No obligations either way. Watched him prepare for bed, her expression unreadable. When finally settled onto his sleeping pad, she had taken up position near the front door, close enough to guard the entrance but positioned to escape if needed. "Good night," said, adjusting his pillow. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the night sounds of Haven 7's native creatures. Was drifting toward sleep when a voice spoke from the darkness, clear, precise, and unmistakably intelligent. "My name is not." Cybernetic eye automatically adjusted to the low light, focusing on the creature near his door. She hadn't moved, but her amber eyes reflected the dim illumination from his wall chronometer. "What is your name?" he asked carefully. Another long pause, as if she was weighing whether to trust him with something precious. She said finally, "My name is, and I am the last of my people," woke to the smell of something burning. His training kicked in immediately, rolling off his sleeping pad and reaching for weapons that weren't there anymore. The acrid smoke was coming from outside, visible through his bedroom window as a dark column rising against the dawn sky. Stood at the front door, her body rigid with tension. When approached, she looked up at him with those intelligent amber eyes. "The south field," she said, her voice carrying an edge he hadn't heard the night before. "Something is wrong." Grabbed his field jacket and emergency kit, muscle memory from decades of military service taking over. "How do you know?" "I can smell the chemicals they use, herbicide mixed with accelerant." Patted out the door ahead of him, her nose lifted to catch scents the human couldn't detect. 3 vehicles, maybe 4, they left maybe an hour ago. The walk to the south field took 15 minutes at its best pace, his artificial leg servos whining softly with each step. Ranged ahead, her movements fluid and silent despite her size. She moved like a scout, realized, someone trained for reconnaissance and stealth operations. The devastation was worse than the smoke had suggested. His entire crop of modified wheat, 6 months of careful cultivation, had been reduced to blackened stubble. Chemical burns the earth in patterns that spelled out a message visible from the sky. "Alien lover." "Damn," breathed, kneeling to examine the soil. The herbicide had been military-grade, designed to sterilize ground for extended periods. This field would be useless for at least 2 years. "They wanted you to know it was deliberate," observed, circling the perimeter of the destruction. "Amateur work, but effective. The chemical signature suggests manufacture." Looked up sharply. "How do you know about chemical weapons?" Paused, as if realizing she'd revealed more than intended. "My people fought them for 30 years before our fell. I was part of the resistance." The pieces began clicking together in his mind. Wasn't just a prisoner, she was a prisoner of war. Someone that had kept alive for information or leverage, now disposed of because she was no longer useful. "What was your rank?" he asked. "Colonel, Special Operations." Her voice carried a pride that 3 years of captivity hadn't broken. "Before the fall of Prime, I commanded the intelligence division that kept our people hidden for 2 additional years." Studied the burn patterns again, this time with a military eye. The attack had been coordinated, professional despite assessment of it being amateur. Multiple vehicles approaching from different angles, precise timing to create maximum psychological impact. "This wasn't random vandalism," he said. "Someone knew about yesterday's meeting with." "The Emperor's visit would have been monitored by your colonial government," agreed. "Who on this world would have access to chemical weapons?" The answer came to like a punch to the gut. Governor Harrison. Had tangled with colonial Governor Thomas Harrison before. The man had made his political career on anti-alien sentiment, campaigning for stricter regulations on non-human contact and trade restrictions that would hurt the outer colonies. Harrison had opposed the peace accords from the beginning, claiming humans were being manipulated by species that couldn't be trusted. He was a logistics officer during the war, explained as they walked back toward his farmhouse. Never saw real combat, but he had access to supply chains and black market connections. Probably kept some hardware when the fighting ended. Listened without interrupting, her tactical mind clearly working through possibilities. The attack serves multiple purposes: intimidation, economic pressure, and a message to others who might consider cooperating with non-humans. Back at the house, activated his communication terminal and sent a message to the colonial administration reporting the vandalism. The response came back within minutes. Due to budget constraints and competing priorities, the Colonial Security Force couldn't investigate property crimes involving less than 10,000 credits in damages. Convenient muttered. They will escalate, said with certainty. This was testing your response. When you don't react with the fear they expect, they will try something more direct. Looked at his unexpected companion, nodding the way she analyzed threats and strategic responses. What would you do if you were still in command? Gather intelligence, identify the full scope of the threat, prepare defensive measures, move to the window, scanning the valley below, and ensure I had allies before the next confrontation. Allies might be in short supply around here, said. Most of the other colonists barely tolerate my presence as it is. Adding an alien companion to the mix won't improve relations. Then we make our own allies. The certainty in his voice made Turn to study her more carefully. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, patted to his communication terminal. May I? Nodded, curious about what she intended. Activated the unit with her nose, then began speaking in a rapid sequence of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that the universal translator couldn't interpret. After several minutes of the strange communication, she stepped back. I have contacted others. Others? Survivors, explained. Not all of my people died on Prime. Some escaped during the final evacuation. A few ended up as prisoners or curiosities throughout space. We maintained contact when possible. Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning temperature. How many others? Unknown. The communication network is fragmented, hidden within commercial data streams and maintenance channels. But my message will reach at least a dozen. Within hours, his communication terminal began receiving responses. Not direct messages, but subtle alterations to standard shipping manifests and orbital traffic reports. To anyone monitoring communications, they would appear to be normal commercial traffic. 2, they apparently contained complex information about locations, capabilities, and timelines. 6 confirmed responses so far, she reported as afternoon approached. 2 are on worlds within 3 days' travel. 4 others are considerably farther, but they acknowledge the signal. What exactly did you tell them? That a human showed unexpected honor in the face of authority, that this human might be worth protecting, looked directly at, and that our survival might depend on making this alliance work. The first sign of external response came that evening. A cargo shuttle requested permission to land its farm for emergency repairs, citing engine trouble that required immediate attention. Colonial Traffic Control approved the request without question. Engine failures were common enough in the outer systems. The shuttle that descended from the darkening sky was clearly modified far beyond standard civilian specifications. Its hull bore scrape marks and patch welds that spoke of combat experience, and its engines ran with the peculiar harmonic frequency that associated with non-human technology. The pilot who emerged made understand why had considered people problematic. Stood nearly 8 feet tall on hind legs that bent in ways human anatomy couldn't match. His frame was broader than built for strength rather than stealth, and his fur was a deep red that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Scars covered his arms and face, some clearly from weapons, others that looked like they came from torture. He said, his voice carrying emotional undertones that the universal translator rendered as relief and cautious hope. We thought you were dead. Nearly was, she replied. This human prevented that outcome. So tension shifted too, and the human found himself being evaluated by an intelligence that had clearly seen extensive combat. Transmitted your service record. Impressive for a primitive species. Thanks, I think, said dryly. You fought for 12 years and survived. Most humans lasted less than 6 months in direct combat with their forces. Moved closer, his massive frame somehow managing to seem non-threatening. What made you different? Stubbornness mostly, admitted, and good friends who kept me alive when I should have died. Something in his expression shifted at that response. Said you showed honor when offered you a gift. Why? Consider the question seriously. Because she's not a gift, she's a person, and people don't belong in cages. And exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes. After a moment, nodded slowly. The will not approve of this alliance, he said. Gave you expecting you to treat her as property or dispose of her as an inconvenience when he discovers she has contacted other survivors. He'll consider the debt violated, finished, and probably use that as an excuse to take action against the colony. Precisely. We estimate you have perhaps a week before surveillance reports reach the Emperor's attention. Walked to his front window, looking out over the valley where ships had landed less than 24 hours ago. His quiet retirement was officially over, replaced by complications that could affect not just his own safety, but the security of every human on Haven 7. "What are you proposing?" he asked. "An alliance," said simply. "Your people and mine working together for mutual survival. Humans have resources and technology we need. We have knowledge and capabilities that could benefit your species." "And if I say no?" Then returns to his ship and disappears into the outer systems. I become a wanderer in your wilderness, and you face Harrison and his supporters alone. Moved to stand beside at the window. "But I think you understand what happens to isolated targets when the predators decide to hunt." Thought about his burned field, about Governor Harrison's political ambitions, and about the fact that he'd spent 3 years avoiding exactly this kind of complex situation. Simple retirement, he'd told himself. No more wars, no more life-or-death decisions, no more responsibility for others' survival. But looking at he realized that some responsibilities couldn't be avoided. They found you whether you wanted them or not. "What do you need from me?" he asked. The relief in both aliens' expressions was unmistakable. Spoke first. "Permission to establish a temporary base on your property. There are others coming. Not many, but enough to begin planning a sustainable future for our people. And from the human side," added, "we need an advocate, someone who understands both military strategy and human politics, someone willing to speak for us when the time comes." Looked out at his valley again, imagining it filled with beings that most humans would consider monsters or threats. The colonists of Haven 7 were already suspicious of anyone who'd shown sympathy toward aliens during the war. Harboring actual alien refugees would probably result in his exile at best. "How many are we talking about?" he asked. 12, possibly 15, answered. "All that remain of a species that once numbered in the millions. 15 individuals, the last remnants of an entire civilization looking for a place to make a final stand against extinction. Had seen species die before. It was one of the inevitable consequences of interstellar warfare. But he'd never been in a position to help prevent it. "There's a cave system in the hills north of here," he said finally. "Natural shelter, fresh water source, concealed from aerial surveillance. If you're careful about your approach routes, you could establish a base there without being detected." Both aliens straightened, hope beginning to replace caution in their expressions. "And if Harrison decides to escalate his campaign against me," continued, "having backup might be useful." Smiled, revealing teeth that would have given most humans nightmares. "We excel at asymmetric warfare. Harrison will discover that harassing a human with allies is considerably more dangerous than terrorizing an isolated farmer." As if summoned by the mention of escalation, his communication terminal chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender identification made his blood run cold. Colonial Governor's Office, official business. Activated the message, and Governor Harrison's face appeared on the screen. The man looked exactly as remembered, soft features that had never known real hardship, eyes that held the particular brand of cruelty that came from wielding power over others without understanding its true cost. Harrison said with false friendliness, "I heard about the unfortunate incident with your crops. Terrible thing, vandalism. Really makes you appreciate how dangerous it can be for citizens who don't have the full support of their community." The threat was subtle but unmistakable, kept his expression neutral. "I'm also concerned about reports of unauthorized alien contact," Harrison continued. "As governor, I have a responsibility to ensure the safety and security of all colonists. I'd hate for any misunderstandings to occur." The message ended, leaving staring at a blank screen. "Well," he said to his alien companions, "looks like we're out of time for gradual planning." Moved to the communication terminal, her ears flat against her skull. A sign of aggression was learning to recognize. She said, "Contact the others. Tell them we implement the emergency protocols." "What are emergency protocols?" asked. Smile became predatory. We introduced Governor Harrison to the concept of asymmetric warfare. The attack came at dawn, 3 days later. Woke to the sound of vehicles approaching his farmhouse, the deep rumble of military-grade hover transports that made the windows rattle in their frames. Through his bedroom window, he counted 6 vehicles arranged in a tactical formation designed to cut off all escape routes. Colonial security forces, by the look of their equipment, but noticed several modifications that weren't standard issue. Enhanced armor plating, weapon systems that belonged on battlefield vehicles rather than civilian police transports, and energy signatures that suggested someone had been shopping in the black market again. "Time to go," said from the doorway. She'd been sleeping in the main room since arrival, maintaining watch rotations that hadn't asked for but definitely appreciated. Grabbed his emergency kit and the data storage unit containing 3 years of farming records. Everything else could be replaced. Where? The caves has been preparing defensive positions since yesterday. They slipped out the back door as the first transport landed in its front yard. Through the pre-dawn darkness, could see armed figures deploying in practiced formations. Harrison wasn't taking any chances. This was a full military operation disguised as a civil enforcement action. The path to the caves wound through dense vegetation that provided excellent concealment for anyone who knew how to move quietly. Led the way, her enhanced senses allowing her to navigate obstacles that would have slowed significantly. Behind them, lights began appearing around the farmhouse as Harrison's people started their search. "They're not being subtle," observed as they climbed higher into the hills. "They don't need to be," replied. "Harrison has probably declared this a terrorist investigation. Colonial law allows him broad powers during security operations." The cave entrance was hidden behind a waterfall that dropped 30 feet into a narrow pool. Had discovered it during his first year on Haven 7, but never explored beyond the outer chamber. Now, as led him through passages that seemed to extend deep into the hillside, he realized the cave system was far more extensive than he'd imagined. Emergency lighting had been strung along the walls, powered by portable fusion cells that cast steady illumination through tunnels that opened into larger chambers. The air was surprisingly fresh, suggesting the cave system had multiple entrances and good ventilation. In the main chamber, got his first look at the full scope of what it had been planning. 12 surrounded a holographic display that showed detailed tactical information about Haven 7's colonial infrastructure. Supply routes, communication networks, power distribution systems, and security force deployment patterns were all mapped with precision that would have impressed his old intelligence officers. They themselves were as diverse as any military unit had served with. Some were built like heavy assault specialists designed for close combat. Others resembled more closely scouts and infiltration experts who moved with predatory grace. A few were smaller and more delicate, but their eyes held the sharp intelligence of technical specialists and strategic planners. Called out as they entered. "Excellent timing. We were just reviewing Governor Harrison's tactical situation." Approached the holographic display, his military experience automatically analyzing the information. "This is incredibly detailed. How did you gather all this?" "We've been here for 3 days," Seta, whose silver-gray fur was marked with geometric patterns that suggested cybernetic integration. "Surveillance, electronic reconnaissance, and social observation. Your colonial security infrastructure has significant vulnerabilities." "Kex specializes in information warfare," explained. "She spent 2 years infiltrating command networks during our resistance campaign." Studied the display more carefully, noting the markers that indicated Harrison's current positions and probable objectives. "They're not just after me. This is preparation for a larger operation." "Correct," Kex confirmed. "Harrison has been building support for military action against alien presence in this sector. Your alliance with us provides the justification he needs to request additional resources from Earth's colonial authority. The political implications hit like a physical blow. He's using us to start another war." "Not another war," corrected grimly. "The continuation of the previous one. There are human factions that never accepted the peace accords. Harrison represents their interests." Felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling onto his shoulders. He'd hoped to leave that burden behind when he retired, but some things followed you no matter how far you ran. "What are our options?" he asked. Activated another section of the holographic display, showing real-time surveillance feeds from around's farmhouse. Harrison's forces had finished their search and were setting up what looked like a permanent observation post. "Option 1, disappear," she said. "We have transportation capabilities that can move us off-world before Harrison can organize a pursuit. Your colonial identity gets dissolved and you start over somewhere else." Option 2, asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like it any better. "We fight," said simply. "Harrison has perhaps 60 personnel and equipment that's impressive by colonial standards, but obsolete by military ones. We have 12 experienced special operations veterans with technology that your people haven't seen yet." Thought about the other colonists on Haven 7, farmers, technicians, and small business operators who'd come to the outer systems for a peaceful life. A shooting war would destroy everything they'd built and probably get innocent people killed in the crossfire. "Option 3, said a new voice from the cave entrance. Turned to see another figure approaching through the tunnels, human, but wearing equipment he'd never encountered before. The man was roughly his age, with the kind of scars and bearing that suggested extensive combat experience. "David Park," the newcomer introduced himself. "Former Federation intelligence, currently working freelance for people who prefer to remain anonymous." "How did you find us?" demanded, her posture shifting into combat readiness. "Same way I found you on 6 other worlds over the past 2 years, Park replied calmly. "I've been tracking survivors since the peace accords were signed. Not to harm them," he added quickly, nodding the way every alien in the chamber was focusing on him. "To help them." Park activated a portable display unit that projected information beside the existing hologram. "There are 17 confirmed survivor groups scattered across human and neutral space. Most are living in hiding, struggling to maintain their culture and technology base with insufficient resources." "And you represent what exactly?" asked. "A coalition of human organizations that believe the peace accords were incomplete. Species extinction is a line that shouldn't be crossed, regardless of political considerations." Park's expression was serious but not threatening. "We've been working to establish sanctuary worlds where displaced populations can rebuild." "Sanctuary worlds controlled by humans," said with obvious skepticism. "Sanctuary worlds administered jointly by the coalition and the survivor populations themselves," Park corrected. "Full autonomy over internal affairs, shared responsibility for external security and resources." Studied the information Park had provided. The Sanctuary World program was more extensive than he'd expected, with funding and support from sources throughout human space. Corporate sponsors, colonial governments, even some military units that had worked alongside alien forces during various conflicts. "Why come here?" asked. "Why now?" "Because Harrison represents exactly the kind of thinking we're trying to counteract," Park explained. "If he succeeds in eliminating the survivors and justifying it as necessary security policy, it sets a precedent that will affect every other displaced species in the region." "And if he fails?" asked. "Then we have a test case that proves human-alien cooperation can work on a practical level. That becomes the foundation for larger cooperative efforts." Looked around the chamber at the 12 who represented the last remnants of an entire civilization. In the military, he'd learned that some battles chose you whether you wanted them or not. This felt like one of those times. "What does option 3 actually involve?" he asked. "We turn this into a political victory instead of a military one," Park said. "Harrison's strength comes from fear and isolation. We counter that with transparency and community support." "You want to go public," said. "Make the alliance visible instead of hiding it." "Exactly. Harrison can justify attacking terrorists or criminals operating in secret. It's much harder to justify attacking refugees who are living openly and contributing to the community." Moved closer to, her amber eyes studying his face. "This plan requires trust from humans who have been taught to fear us. Are you willing to stake your life on human compassion?" Thought about the colonists he'd met over the past 3 years. Most were decent people trying to build something better in the outer systems. They'd been suspicious of him initially, a military veteran with classified experience and visible cybernetic modifications. But time and consistent behavior had eventually earned their acceptance. "The humans on this world aren't Harrison's supporters," he said slowly. They're his constituents. There's a difference. Meaning asked. Meaning they'll listen to evidence if it's presented properly. They'll respond to demonstrated value rather than abstract fear. Looked at each of the in turn. What can you offer that would benefit the colony directly? The response was immediate and comprehensive. Medical technology that could treat diseases the colony's equipment couldn't handle. Agricultural techniques that could increase crop yields in Haven 7's challenging soil conditions. Engineering expertise that could improve everything from power distribution to water purification systems. And in terms of security, Kex added, we can provide intelligence and defensive capabilities that would make Harrison's corporate backers think twice about future operations. Park nodded approvingly. That's the foundation of the political strategy. We schedule a colony assembly meeting, present the alliance as a mutual benefit arrangement, and let the colonists decide for themselves. And if they decide they don't want alien neighbors, asked. Then we implement option 1 or 2, said, but we try this first. Over the next 6 hours, they planned an operation that would have made old commanding officers proud. Coordinated information distribution, carefully timed public demonstrations of capabilities, and strategic use of local media to ensure the message reached every household on Haven 7. Kex had already tapped into Harrison's communications, providing intelligence about his next moves. The governor was planning to declare a state of emergency within 48 hours, giving him expanded authority to deal with the alien threat. Once that happened, public assembly would become nearly impossible. We have one chance, said as they finalized the operational timeline. If this goes wrong, we'll be facing military action with no legal protection. And if it goes right, asked. Then maybe we start something bigger than just survival, answered. Maybe we start proving that different species can build something together instead of just destroying each other. Activated his communication terminal and began recording a message that would be transmitted to every household on Haven 7 within the hour. Citizens of Haven 7, he began, my name is, 3 days ago I was given a choice between fear and hope. Today I'm asking you to make the same choice. As he spoke, the 12 survivors prepared to emerge from hiding and trust their future to the judgment of humans they'd never met. It was either the beginning of a new kind of alliance or the end of the last free in the galaxy. Looked at, remembering her words from that first night, I am the last of my people. Maybe that was about to change. Maybe they were all about to discover what last actually meant when people refused to let extinction win. The message transmission began, carrying their declaration of alliance to every corner of the colony. Within hours, they would know whether humanity and they could build a future together, or whether some chasms were too wide to bridge. Chose to believe in the possibility of bridges. Sometimes, that was the most human thing you could do.